Today, we cover an American serial killer and rapist believed to have murdered and tortured up to 67 men between 1971 and 1983, and who earned himself the nickname the Scorecard Killer. This is the terrifying murder spree of Randy Kraft. True gay crime contains coarse language, adult themes, and content that is violent and disturbing. If at any time you feel you need help, please refer to the toll-free crisis lines in the show notes. March 1970, and the sun hangs low in the California sky. The man stares from the boardwalk and out to sea where the sun twinkles off the Pacific Ocean. A seagull squawks in the distance. He notices movement in the periphery of his vision and turns his head to see a young boy walking along the boardwalk. The predator locks eyes on the innocent boy. He's alone, walking aimlessly, easy prey. The wheels are set. There's no turning back. The man approaches the boy with a smile. "Hi, what are you up to?" The boy explains he's run away from home and has nowhere to go. "I have a place you can stay," says the man, even promising sex with an easygoing female neighbor of his. The boy pauses and thinks, then agrees to go with the man to his Belmont Shore apartment. They enter the tidy apartment, and the man offers the boy some wine. Hours later, the man dresses and leaves the apartment for work. The boy comes to, alone, in the apartment. His head hurts, his body hurts, he has cuts and bruises. Panicked, he runs out the front door and into a nearby bar, where shocked patrons call an ambulance. At the hospital, his stomach is pumped, and he tells police he's been drugged and beaten. The boy, 13-year-old Joseph Alvin Fancher, tells police the whole story, everything but the sexual assault. He's too ashamed, and he's afraid no one will believe him. He leads police back to the Belmont Shore apartment, where they find illegal drugs and photos of men having sex, but without a warrant, they can't make an arrest. And Randy Kraft gets away with his first assault, spurring him on to continue his reign of terror. But where does the madness begin? Randy Kraft is born in Long Beach, California on March 19, 1945. He's the fourth child and only son of Opal Lee and Harold Herbert Kraft, a family originally from Wyoming. Being the only son, Kraft is doted on by his mother and three sisters, but his father is rarely around to attend family functions. He's an accident-prone child, breaking his collarbone one year and falling down the stairs, knocking himself out another. In 1948, the family moves to super conservative Westminster in Orange County. The family become active in the Westminster First Presbyterian Church, and his mom becomes chairman of the Deacons Committee. In elementary school, he's noted for his intelligence by teachers, even attending accelerated classes. His mom is part of the PTA. As a teenager, he becomes interested in politics, becomes a staunch Republican, and wants to become a U.S. Senator. He even forms a group with two friends called the Westminster World Affairs Club. At school, he's bright, he's pleasant, he learns the saxophone and dates a couple of girls, even though he knows he's gay, but he decides to keep that information to himself. In 1963, he graduates 10th of 390 students and starts school at the super conservative Claremont Men's College that fall. Because of his parents' influence, Kraft is a conservative, supporting the Vietnam War and campaigning for right-wing presidential candidates, but it's during his second year, where he's away from home, that something starts to happen. He grows out his hair, he grows a mustache, he starts leaning left politically, and he picks up a part-time job bartending at a gay bar in Garden Grove. He starts driving out to Laguna and Huntington Beach for casual sex with hustlers. His roommate at the time notices that Kraft disappears for days on end and comes home in the wee hours of the morning saying, quote, "What he did wasn't something he wanted you to know about." And the rumors start going around school that Kraft is also into bondage. He suffers from migraines and stomach issues and gobbles Valium to ease his suffering. His first tryst with drugs and their effect on the person. To escape the speculation and rumors, he decides to move off of campus with a new roommate in Huntington Beach. In 1966, he propositions an undercover policeman and is arrested for lewd conduct, but he gets off with a first offense warning. By now, he's spending all of his free time drinking beer, doing drugs, playing poker, and hanging out in gay bars, which ultimately stopped him from graduating with the rest of his class, having to repeat a class and graduate 8 months later. By now, he's fully supporting the political left at this time, and he registers as a Democrat and campaigns hard for Robert F. Kennedy in 1968, so much so that he receives a personal letter from Kennedy for his efforts. Kraft, of course, is devastated when Kennedy is assassinated, and 4 months after his graduation, he joins the U.S. Air Force, rising through the ranks to Airman First Class and Supervisor Manager. But when he comes out as gay the next year, his family is shocked. His dad flies into a rage, and his mom, though more understanding, is still very disapproving. Ultimately, though, they would come to terms with it. When he discloses to the Air Force that he's gay, he is granted a general discharge, officially listed as being a medical grounds discharge. He fights the charges, but loses and moves back home with his parents. He's disillusioned. Kraft goes back to civilian life. He starts a diet of speed and beer and resumes his bartending career. It's at this point that Kraft lives at the Belmont Shore apartment and meets 13-year-old Joseph Alvin Fancher from the opening story we heard. As we know, he sexually assaults Fancher, but he gets away with it. The next year, Kraft enrolls briefly at Long Beach State University, where he meets Jeff Graves, a fellow teaching student from Minnesota. The two hit it off, they start dating, and they move in together. Interesting side note, the men actually live together for the next 5 years, during which time 16 known murders take place. Whether or not Jeff Graves knew what Randy Kraft was doing, we'll never know. What we do know is that from this point on, Kraft goes on a murder spree. The body count and brutalness of the crimes is astounding, with his first suspected murder happening around September 20th, 1971. So, here's what we're going to do. Instead of going into the gruesome details of each individual victim, I'm going to lay out Kraft's general MO once, here, right now. So if you don't want to hear the details, you can skip ahead a little bit. But as we move forward, I'm going to name the victims and the general circumstances that they're found, minus the humiliating, dehumanizing details, because I do want to honor the victims. And I find, as I was writing this and doing the research, I found there were so many victims, and repeating the same dehumanizing, horrible circumstances in which their lives were taken from them, I just didn't want to sensationalize this story by going into each detail with each victim. Okay, that being said, Kraft, like so many others, had a style to his murders. First of all of his victims were males between the ages of 13 to 35, many of them part of the U.S. Marine Corps. Their bodies are found with high levels of alcohol and tranquilizers, meaning they were probably unconscious for most of the abuse, thank God. He typically lures his victims into his vehicle, offers them alcohol and drugs. When they're unconscious or unable to resist an attack, they were bound and tortured. Many are found with cigarette lighter burns around their nipples, scrotum, and face. Many are sodomized. Some are emasculated. Others have objects inserted into their rectums, like tree branches, socks, or their own genitals. And it's this particular detail that I'm going to omit from the victims to spare them of it: the sodomizing, the emasculating, the objects protruding from the rectums. Death is usually by strangulation, asphyxiation, or bludgeoning. The bodies are then discarded on the side of the freeway, often thrown out of the moving car and found nude or semi-nude. Okay. Now that we have a general idea of the type of torture he would inflict on the victims, the horror begins. Police find the nude body of 30-year-old Long Beach resident Wayne Joseph Duquette discarded on the side of the highway. Putrefaction, which is the 5th stage of death, meaning he had advanced decomposition, had destroyed any usable evidence for the police. So they test his blood and they find high blood alcohol levels, and they list the cause of death as acute alcohol poisoning. When police later find Kraft's journal, referred to as his scorecard, the first entry reads stable. Now, Duquette was a bartender at a gay bar called The Stable, and so it's believed that he is Kraft's first victim. December 1972, Edward Daniel Moore, a 20-year-old Marine, leaves the barracks at Camp Pendleton. His body is found beside the 405 freeway by a motorist in the early morning hours. He was pushed from a moving vehicle. An autopsy shows that his ankles and wrists were bound. He was beaten about the head with a blunt object, bitten, and strangled. 6 weeks later, a new 18-year-old John Doe is found by the Terminal Island Freeway. He's found strangled. The next month, 17-year-old Kevin Clark Bailey is found discarded in Huntington Beach, fully dressed except for his socks and shoes. Another John Doe is found this time dismembered, his body parts in different counties. He had been bound and his body refrigerated before being disposed of. In July of the same year, 20-year-old Ronnie Jean Weed is found lifeless beside the ramp of the 405 freeway. He had been bound and suspended upside down from a device before the murder. He had bite marks on his stomach and penis. The last victim of 1973 is 23-year-old art student Vincent Cruz Mesta. He's pulled from a ravine in San Bernardino Mountains in December 1973. He is found clothed, but barefoot. His face and head are freshly shaved, and he's missing his hands. There's a 6-month break here where the killing stopped before 20-year-old Malcolm Eugene Little is found in June 1974. His nude body propped up against a mesquite tree near Highway 86. Little was an unemployed truck driver newly arrived from Alabama and looking for work. 3 weeks after that, 18-year-old Roger Dickerson is at a bar in San Clemente when he accepts a ride from Kraft to LA. His body is found strangled with bite marks and his nude body left near a Laguna Beach golf course. 25-year-old Thomas Paxton Lee, a waiter and part-time hustler, is last seen leaving a bar in Wilmington. Oil-filled workers find his fully clothed body in Long Beach. He had been strangled. 19-year-old James Dale Reeves decided to go cruising on Thanksgiving in 1974. Police find him nude, except for a bloody t-shirt. Now it's January 1975, and 17-year-old John Laris, who gets a pair of roller skates for Christmas, is anxious to try them out, so he leaves for the Long Beach skating rink. Some beachgoers find him face down in the surf off of Sunset Beach. He was bound, strangled, and had alcohol in his system. Police find 2 sets of footprints in the sand indicating 2 people had carried the body from the parking to the ocean. At this point, there has been some speculation by police that there was more than one person responsible for committing all of these murders, and to complicate things, there is some timeline overlap between Randy Kraft and another highway killer, Patrick Kearney. But 2 weeks later, 21-year-old Craig Victor Yonates is strangled to death near the Golden Sails Hotel in Long Beach near the Pacific Coast Highway. He's barefoot but fully dressed. With 14 victims and bodies discarded in 4 counties, in January 1975, detectives meet in Santa Ana to put together a task force. Officers from Orange County, Imperial, and San Bernardino counties, along with LA, Long Beach, Seal Beach, Irvine, and Huntington Beach. There's an FBI profiler from Quantico, Virginia, a special investigator from the California State Attorney General's office, and a bunch of forensic psychologists. They put a profile together of a man who, quote, desires to be masculine but does not feel masculine, gnawing the nipples and genitals of his prey to symbolically make the victim a female. They describe the killer as, quote, a methodical, organized lust killer of above average intelligence, believing the work to be done by more than one killer and that one or both must have had military background experience. The victims are all Caucasian with similar physical characteristics, and despite all of the law enforcement people working together, police have no solid suspects, and the murders continue. It's March 1975, and Kraft lures 2 youths into his car in a Long Beach parking lot. The boys are Keith Crotwell and Kent May. They're given beer and Valium as Kraft drives around aimlessly. Once they both passed out, Kraft returns to the parking lot, but what he doesn't know is that 2 of Keith and Kent's friends are watching as the distinctive black and white Mustang pulls into the parking lot. Kraft opens the passenger door, leans over, pushes Kent out of the car, and drives away with an unconscious Keith. 2 months later, Keith's skull is found on a jetty close to the Long Beach Marina. Upon hearing the news, the 2 friends that saw him disappear in the Mustang and who suspect that the owner of the car is a patron of the Belmont Shore Gay Bar start searching the neighborhood for the car. And can you believe? They find it. Less than 1 mile from their home, they take the license plate number and go to the police. The police, of course, find the car is registered to a one Randy Kraft. When he's brought in and questioned by the police, Kraft spins a tale that goes a little like this. He admits to meeting two young men in the parking lot, offering them beer and Valium while they drove around. He says he returned Kent to the parking lot and continues driving with Keith to a side road close to the El Toro off-ramp where his car got stuck in a ditch. He leaves Keith with the car and walks to the nearest gas station to call a tow truck. When he returns to the car, Keith is gone. Police are unconvinced with the story, but when they go to file a homicide charge, the Los Angeles District Attorney's Office declines, saying the coroner believes the death to be an accidental drowning. After being questioned by police, Kraft is spooked, to say the least, and lays low for 6 months, during which time his migraines and stomach pains worsen, and he starts to suffer from insomnia. Perhaps it's the frustration of almost getting caught, but Kraft's next murder is one of the most brutal. On December 31st, he abducts 22-year-old Mark Hall, who's taken to a remote canyon and bound to a tree. He's tortured more than any other victim so far, including burns all over his body with a car lighter and broken bottle slices on his legs. Worst of all, autopsy reports confirm he was alive during most of the ordeal. Not surprisingly, Kraft's relationship with Jeff Graves starts to fall apart. The men have been living together and in a relationship this entire time. But by 1976, the two call it quits, and Kraft immediately starts a new relationship with 19-year-old apprentice baker Jeff Seelig. The two move into a Laguna Hills apartment, where Seelig later tells police that the men are not monogamous during their relationship, with Kraft propositioning hitchhikers to come home with them for a threesome. Seelig tells cops that Kraft was never violent with him and had never seen him act violently towards anyone in general. In December 1976, 19-year-old Paul Joseph Fuchs goes missing, and though his body is never found, the police, who would later be in possession of Kraft's scorecard, which clearly says the name Fuchs, put two and two together. We know from the scorecard that Paul is one of Kraft's victims. That, along with the fact that Paul and Kraft were known to frequent a gay bar called Ripples. Distracted with his new relationship, Kraft takes another break from his killing spree for 16 months, at which points he adds to his MO, and instead of just discarding bodies by the freeways, he now disposes some of them in trash bags. These bags are left in dumpsters and only discovered when the bags tear while being moved. In January of '78, homicide investigators convene, but things are different this time. They know that there's more than one killer involved. They know because another freeway killer, Patrick Kearney, has just confessed to killing 28 young men and boys. His victims are often dissected and discarded in trash bags by the freeway in Southern California. Kearney, though, unlike Kraft, would also use a gun to shoot his victims in the head. Additionally, Kearney wouldn't torture his victims like Kraft did, so even though they have Kearney in custody, they know there is still an unidentified killer on the loose. They know because as Kearney arrives at San Quentin prison, the highway murders continue at an alarming pace. 19-year-old Marine from Camp Pendleton, Scott Michael Hughes, is plied with Valium before being strangled and left beside the 91 freeway ramp in Orange. 2 months later, 23-year-old Roland Gerald Young is released from Orange County Jail. He leaves lockup at 8:19 p.m. and is found dead at 3:30 a.m. in an Irvine gutter. He has alcohol and Valium in his system. He's been bound and stabbed 4 times and thrown from a fast-moving car near the San Diego freeway.